Self-discovery is an essential step of this philosophy because it helps to identify, question, and confirm both who we think we are as well as who we are here to be. We cannot step into our power if we aren't clear in who we are and what we stand for. To assist with this process, there are two tools that are referenced often within the language of this philosophy: the Human Design System, which we discussed in episode 12 of this podcast, and the Destiny Card System, which we will discuss now. Let's journey.
Wise.
With Aaron and Alexander.
Uncovering our authentic self.
Through self-awareness, conscious communication, and emotional responsibility. Woo! Finally, Alexander and I are here to lay down the Destiny Card System episode. So a lot of you remember the Human Design episode that we did. I think it was around episode 15 or 16. So the Human Design is one of the tools that we use to help you learn more about yourself, and the Destiny Card System complements that as well. So Alexander, let's get into a little bit of the overview of the Destiny Card System and then the differences between it and the Human Design and how it all interacts and interweaves in this philosophy.
Yeah, it seems like this episode is a long time coming, actually. So nice to get to it. And I want to shine the light on the way that I approach these two tools and these two systems that I carry respect for, but I do utilize them just a little bit differently within the Just philosophy, but their language resonates with me so well. And this Destiny Card System that we're going to be talking about today is based off of ancient Egyptian numerology. So I want all of you to get past the idea of the cards and thinking that it's connected to tarot cards or anything like that. It's really just a avenue to get a language across, and that language basically being based around numerology and these symbols. So the general descriptions of them is like, the hearts are connected to more relationship-oriented actions. The diamonds are connected to like more material type acquisitions, those types of goals. That's not always monetary. For some people it's time, for some people it's family, but it is what they value. The clubs is about like knowledge of all types. They're the teachers, the philosophers. And then the spades represents the futuristic technology and like spiritual information or religious information. So all of these different types have a specific influence. And the way that I break down this planetary influence, whether we're talking human design or we're talking these cards or even Western astrology or many different systems out there, and I want to show appreciation for all of them. These are just, out of all the systems I studied, these were the two systems that really spoke to me in my language, and it was just very organic going into studying these. And they become together just what I perceive as a clear tool to help us. And in the Human Design, it really helps us to understand the energetic side of things and how we are affecting and influencing one another, and shows some strengths and weaknesses. And with the Destiny Card System is more based around your personality and your how you interact in your relationships, whether that be through karmic payment or through family lineage. And so the language of the cards does, talk in a way of past lives or reincarnation. But I want people to be comfortable with that. If that's not what you believe in, this isn't to challenge that. Just simply replace that language of past lives with things being passed down through your genes or through your family lineage. That's another way to interpret that. And so now we're getting into, how I explain the basic understanding of how these planets influence us. And in modern day time, there's not much doubt of how much effect the full moon has on people. And you can ask anyone, in law enforcement or that works in a hospital, if things intensity increases around full moon, and it's absolute from most anybody that works in those areas. And there's not really any question that the moon affects the ocean. And so by logic, we're over 70% water. And so we're being affected by those different moon phases. And it goes, once again, connected to logic that if one planet affects us, then other planets affect us as well in different ways. And this all connects under this vibrational philosophy, or my just philosophy, that everything is vibration and giving off a vibration. And when you have certain resonances, so to say, you connect, and that amplifies that influence. Very similar to how genes are passed down through the biological side. And somebody that has a history of lung cancer in their family may be more susceptible to smoking than somebody that doesn't. And so this is the way that I want this astrology or this information, planetary information, to be viewed and looked at. It's not a belief system. It's not challenging anyone's religion or spiritual path. It's just showing a frequency language and how we're being affected by these frequencies. So with the cards, we're going to go through a description of each number. I just went over the suits in a very brief manner, and we'll make some of the connections as well as using Aaron and myself, maybe our charts, to give examples of what we experienced throughout the last year, because we do offer reports that are yearly reports that break your year down into 52-day cycles. And with the understanding that every 52 days, the planets shift enough to bring in a different influence. And this can help us to understand thoughts or worries that just come out of nowhere, or change in the way that we feel or think about something very suddenly. And it's all in how we are being affected as these planets are moving around out here. And so it became fascinating to me. I dove right into it over 20 years ago, and has provided a lot of information for me and my clients.
And for people who haven't heard this term before, the Destiny Card System, maybe this is the first episode you're listening to, it is based around a set of a regular deck of 52 cards. So when Alexander's talking about the suits, we are talking about an ace through king 4-suit system. And based on my limited research, which I would love to get more into, the origin of these, it is something that came from ancient Egypt and was kind of hid by a secret society called the Order of the Magi. And I think they kept the knowledge hidden for a certain amount of time until, I guess, the society was ready for it to be unveiled. And I think it's only been open and again, the knowledge for maybe a couple hundred years.
Yeah, and there's a great mythology with this, and the importance of numbers and cards. They used to only be carried by very respectable, or gypsies, but very respectable people of authority. And it wasn't common for people to be able to have their access to these types of cards. And so numerology through history has been respected much more deeply than it is presently. And so this begins to lend a certain connection to the possibility of the issue that our country has in gambling, and understanding that some people are so attracted to numbers, so attracted to that energy of gambling, that it's very hard and addictive, very difficult for them to get out of it. And that does show the power of some of these numbers. So even though it's become much more available in present day, we can certainly track the availability to the amount of issues that it's created. So I just like to suggest that however you're experiencing numbers, just treat them with respect. And there is a just a certain sacredness about certain things on this planet, and certain shapes and numerology and even words. We choose what is special to us, and I just like to say, hey, respect those numbers. They've got a lot to teach you if you're open to seeing the language.
So let's go ahead and break down the structure to each individual person that the Destiny card system entails. So it is based on just your birth date, and each individual person will have a birth card and a planetary ruling card. Usually, some people have like two planetary ruling cards, or so, there are
And
special
some people's
circumstances.
birth card and planetary ruling card is the same card.
Yeah. So go ahead and break down, Alexander, for us the difference between the birth card and the planetary ruling card.
Okay, the planetary ruling card, it helps to look at that to view it as like a personality description. So many times when people read their birth card and they read their planetary ruling card, they resonate more with the planetary ruling card. And much of our personality is also, of course, designed around our environment. But that environment, and I really enjoy, of course, dissecting this with people as well, and environment is just as important as the biological side or the energetic side, because it's part of where the influence truly comes from. But these numbers, these cards, so to say, and the human design help you to understand your level of sensitivity in that environment, and why some of your siblings or other people that are around during those times weren't affected the same, because we should view each other as equal, but we're not truly created equal. We have different variances in the way we respond to energy, just like we have different variances biologically. And so, although I do feel very strongly about equality, it's very important for us to see that as individuals we're very different. And I happen to feel that we need to celebrate that, because when we come together, we fill in voids for each other. And this is the beauty of truly practicing, kindness and love, is to utilize each other rather than use each other. And so, through understanding these couple of systems, it helps to develop a language to where you can communicate and know certain things about each other very quickly. And so, like throughout the episodes in the past, we'll throw out terms like generator or manifesting generator, 4-6-1-4, and that's all human design language. And then we'll throw out Queen of Hearts, 10 of Clubs, or 7 of Diamonds, or 3 of Hearts. Those different terminology is talking more about this Destiny cards, and that's what we're clearing up on this episode. So the planetary ruling card is more like your personality, and then your birth card is more like some people say your destiny, or I like to just say your direction. And it's not something that's forced upon you, because this is another way that I explain this, that these planets aren't controlling you necessarily. They're just influencing you, like your mother and father have certain influences on you from you being in their environment and you having their biology in you. That doesn't mean that you have to be limited to those influences. But when you're in harmony with them, normally you're in resonance with their influence. And so being in the flow of life, that's kind of what we're talking about here, that you understand the flow that's happening, and you can understand that through following this card system and knowing what 52-day period you're in, then understanding your human design and your type and how you're reacting to these times. And so this is a philosophy that's based off of understanding and truly peeling the onion back to understand yourself at multiple deep levels, from both an intellectual side, an intuitional side, on many different levels. And so these two tools are very, very useful, and understanding that, yes, that planetary ruling being your personality, sometimes we have to let go of parts of our personality to step into that higher direction. And some people's cards are very different from mine. For example, 10 of Clubs, planetary ruling card, and a Queen of Hearts birth card. And those two cards are drastically different. They're labeled as the 10 of Clubs is the master of knowledge, and the Queen of Hearts is the loving mother. And so, we'll get into different explanations, and we'll share more about mine and more about Aaron's. And then we're going to get into each individual number and card and give you guys a brief description to where you can stop off and check that out. We're also going to post a picture from an excerpt from a book by Robert Camp, a wonderful gentleman that has extended this work and made it much more accessible. We'll be displaying on our Facebook page a copy of those birth card and planetary ruling cards where people can look that up and just get some general information about yourself.
Yeah, so when somebody goes to our Facebook page to perhaps see this chart that will have every month and day listed out, and then your birth card and planetary ruling card, we want them to be able to make a connection between what their card is and what that kind of means. So let's get into a brief description of each ace through king, because you already went over the suits. So basically you would take the energetic vibration representation that we're going to talk about and apply it to whatever the suit is. So let's start out with the ace, Alexander, and go up from there.
So yeah, we'll start off with the aces. The aces carry a beautiful energy, and understand there is no better or worse. Like in the human design, when we talk about different types and these different numbers or suits, there's no better or worse. It's just different influences and different traits, so to say, different flavors.
And would you say there's like a high and low of each card?
There is normally like a high-end representation of the card and a low-end representation. That's another reason I enjoyed and appreciated this language, of course, because the just philosophy is based around the understanding of polarity versus duality in this world, and we break that down in many different previous episodes. But basically, polarity is necessary because friction is needed for life on this planet. But duality is when you resist that both sides have to exist. And so there are many people that are drawn to a certain side, and they don't always realize that they're creating just an equal resistance of the opposite on the other side. And that's due to the balance that must be created through, this physical plane or physics. And so we're not ever talking woo-woo stuff on this podcast. We are talking scientific, physics-based, energetic concepts and how to bring those into everyday life. So the ace is a very playful energy typically, and they're the beginners. So they can be notorious for starting projects but not really finishing anything, and people can pick on them throughout their whole life. They can be the type of person that has 5 books open at the same time reading them. They can have multiple jobs. Normally aces will, especially if they work for themselves, they'll have just multiple jobs going on. And understand that even 10s out there listen to this as well, because 10's just an ace plus 0. And even a jack is considered an 11. So start to see how all of these things connect. And even the 1, the 10, and the jack have certain levels of these ace traits. So beginnings is very important for aces, and so they can many times enjoy getting something going and then handing it off and letting somebody else take over. They can also either be very codependent or very independent, and that normally depends on how the person feels about themselves. So aces can go either way with that. Then with 2s, they really seek out partnerships very, very intently. A 2 of diamonds person can hypothetically seek out those business partnerships, and they're always looking to partner up with people, where a 2 of hearts is very intentional on their intimate relationship, or even their family or their children. Sometimes it's their parents. 2s can be overly protective even. But 2s are really, really supportive, and that's one of the most beautiful thing about 2s is they typically want to be part of something, which can create, like I said earlier, the low side of the codependency. The 3s are very, very creative, and they're some of the most creative people that are out there. And that's why every three that I work with in my private practice, the very first question is, what do you do creative in your life? And many times they say nothing. And this is a big part of their lack of happiness, is because creative energy has to move for creative people, or it starts to weigh them down. So depression and a lack of creativity is very well linked. And so that's where some discipline sometimes is needed for those creative people to push themselves to get to that place of creating, to change that energy. So threes can be very creative in every aspect of life. And, a three of clubs, for example, can be a genius the way that they're able to use words. They're able to manipulate the way that they see things through their wordage. And so they can be very powerful speakers and teachers and artists of all types. To where a three of diamonds may be very good at entrepreneur type business, and normally threes work really good as an independent because they like making their own decisions. But the heavy side of the threes is when they are not creating, when life gets mundane, it gets very heavy, and the low side of creative energy is worry. And once that creative person gets on that worry, they normally squirrel cage that, so to say, and just make it a lot worse than it actually is, when they need to just get that energy moving and get something creative going. Fours are all about structure. And I have many friends that are fours. And once again, you can break a four down into like 2 fours make an 8. So the 4s and 8s are connected, and even to 2s a little bit. So, but the 4s structure is very important. And with a lot of 4s, many times they will see structure as a lack of freedom. And I try to help them to understand that no, structure is very important. It's just important that they develop the structure. And then there can actually be this huge freedom in structure when they're not following somebody else's timeline, somebody else's restrictions. And if you do work just a regular 9-to-5 job or something like that, and you're a 4, then realize and understand this, and either start making efforts toward creating your own business, or start working towards being more content with the structure that you're stuck in. And once again, pay attention to whether, as we're going through these numbers, whether it is your planetary ruling card, your personality, which you probably presently exemplify and resonate with, or it could be your birth card that you're not necessarily feeling like you resonate with, but that may be a key to your happiness once again. And normally that pull to shift into that birth card many times doesn't happen for people until 45 or after. The pull really starts around 35, and I see this in a lot of people, but action many times don't start until between 39 and 45. And then if people wait much longer past 45, that's when the energy gets very distorted, and many people do things that they regret. But the 4s are very steady work, and most of the 4s will talk about hard work, and that word offends a lot of people. And so I like to replace hard work, makes them happy, with just steady work. And that means something that they are steadily working toward, a goal or an interest that they have, and they are feeding it every day. That's what really lifts the 4 up. We'll go into 5s. 5s are the most restless of the numbers. And I've been around a lot of 5s. They can be very creative. They can be very scattered. They can be very intense even. And then they can feel very lost. So they can be all over the place, so to say. And most of the time when I talk to a 5, they've been given certain labels through Western evaluation, and whether that's bipolar or attention deficit disorder, many different things that really they're just designed to not really be that focused on one thing. And it does help them to use a discipline, something like meditation or contemplation, to learn to bring their thoughts, condense their thoughts down, because their minds can run at a very, very fast speed. and it can be very challenging for them. So, but fives have energy to get things moving. And once again, they can be a little tied into the ones where they can be notorious for starting things and then abandoning them. So when they have somebody that they can hand off an idea or a piece of work to, that's helpful to them. But they can seem very restless, and so travel, many fives really feed off of travel. And it's very important that five have somebody as a mate that is into spontaneity and experiencing new things quite often, because the five really gets tired of mundane quickly. Then we'll shift into sixes, and sixes are one of the more challenging of the numbers, because it can seem like nothing ever changes. And sixes can be guilty of getting stuck in ruts and having more than the average challenge to break bad habits, to break out of those certain situations. So many six of diamonds will get into making a certain amount of money and they just can't seem to change it. And even if they change jobs, it seems like they get stuck into that same type of job or payment. And so it's really hard for them to change their value of themselves. And like a six of hearts is, they can get stuck in the same old routine type of relationships and attract in the same type of people even if they leave relationships. So they have to put forth extra effort to affect change in their lives. But the high side of the sixes is they are constantly available to see their life's mission or their life's purpose. And that's always being revealed, because when you get a 52-day yearly chart of the cards, and they're just $25, when you have sixes in your spreads, it tells you that this is a good year to uncover your life purpose or your destiny direction and that type of thing. So they're very, very intuitive, and many times they are the sounding boards for a lot of other people. So the main suggestion for them is just to, work to push their mundane cycles in bringing more spontaneity in to affect change. So then we go to sevens. And sevens is one of the so-called Christ consciousness cards. And so there's normally with that term comes a certain level of high responsibility. And so what I've seen with the sevens is they can go through times that seem very challenging. And normally that challenge is to practice certain values of many different religions, such as love thy neighbor and turn the other cheek, and to accept people for, who they are and what they are. And whether you look at karma is paid, or you're looking at some other type of payment when money gets taken away from you or a loved one. Many people judge that different ways, but there's a basic understanding that sevens are tied into this, like seven of hearts, for instance. A couple of years ago, I went through some things professionally, and I'd never had my professional ethics questioned. And all of a sudden, a certain situation had come up, which I knew had no validity to, but I went and looked in my cards, and I was carrying a seven of hearts for that entire year. And what it said was to recognize that anyone that I have any conflict with is working something out, and whether that's a karmic payment from me to them or me just being a role player in their life, and that the job is to not take it personal. So a seven of diamonds would mean that maybe you loaned somebody some money and they didn't give it back. And it's all about the lesson you get from that. And so their life is just kind of has a lot of these opportunities to practice these certain situations, and to give an opportunity to carry compassion in a very challenging situation. Like a seven of clubs could be connected to being open to other people's ways of perceiving things or seeing things, and not being so forceful in your attitude. And as I tell people often, sometimes our silence carries way more strength than our words. And knowing when to be silent and be confident in what you know can be so much more powerful than trying to be forceful with words. So all you sevens out there, you beautiful people, and keep your chin up, and you always know what is the right response. And so I tip my hat to you, and keep working on those proper responses and lessening those reactions. The eights, we shift into the people that are really connected to like reciprocation and the cycles of life and cycles in general. And normally eights are very blessed people in whatever area that their card highlights. That doesn't necessarily mean they have it easier. It just really seems like with an eight, many times before anything is taken away, they get two or three things offered. And as long as they can stay out of the bitterness of letting something go, they're already prepared for ahead of time. So it's very important for eights to stay in gratitude. And the more that you practice gratitude, the more it just seems to amplify that and lessen the lessons, so to say. So eight of heart people are just some of the most physically beautiful and special. They draw attention. They're called the sunshine cards, and so they're normally very popular even. So, you get into eight of spades, they can be extremely influenceable in a spiritual or religious way. And just what typically an eight represents can be very, very influential. And so by them staying in the flow of trusting life and knowing that when a door closes, there's three that had already opened. So pay attention out there, eights. The gifts are all around you. So then we shift into nines, and nines are all about completions. The biggest challenge I see consistently with nines is that acceptance of when a relationship is done, or when a job is done, or when a way of thinking or being is done. And so one of their biggest struggles is struggling with their egos and setting things aside. So I just suggest to nines to not be too opinionated, because given enough time, you will change the way that you see whatever that subject is. And so the less firm that you have to be, the later on, the less so-called crow that you have to eat, because most nines at some point will go back on something that they've said in the past. So just be careful about what you state as so-called statements and facts, because nines get caught in their own prisons of not allowing themselves to change when they feel and know that the change is necessary. So nines many times will stay in jobs longer than they need to, or relations, or a way of thinking. And then when they finally break out of that, they feel so relieved. So accept the endings, nines, and move on. So then we come to tens, and the 10 being the master number and the 1 with the 0. And that doesn't mean that all tens are masters. Me, for example, I'm not saying that I'm a master of knowledge. It just was simply saying that my personality seeks that mastery. And so, as I've said in previous podcasts, I was never a very good student through school. I didn't read very much at all. But once I got introduced to metaphysics, I really dove into that so deeply for 10 years and studied everything that I could get my hands on, metaphysical and philosophy-wise. And so this is what I've developed over 22 years of breaking out of that box and just seeing what is discoverable out here. So those tens, that knowledge, of course, the clubs is what I was looking for my whole life to feed me. And unfortunately, our public school system didn't have that. But through divine order, I was influenced and brought into that in my late 20s, and I'm so thankful for that. So tens, like 10 of hearts, normally family and groups of people, they do really well with that. Tens of clubs are the teachers, the healers. There's the 10 of spades are very powerful teachers in the religious and spiritual worlds. And, 10 of diamonds are masters in the money world. So they can be very good people to partner up with when you're trying to move a product along. Okay, so next with the jacks, we can also look at that as the number 11. And jacks are very, very crafty. They can even go to the extent to be very manipulative. So I tell, especially parents with jack children, I say just be very, very wise that they are very keen on getting what they want. And not that all jacks are deceptive, they just have this pull and this ability to know what to say, know what to do to get the other person's attention, to know how to work towards getting what they initially want. So teenage jacks and early 20s jacks are very experiential, and they can wreak havoc on parents just because they are the kind of jesters, the ones that I dare you, and the jack says, I'll do it. But the other side of the jack is the creativity, and that is the high side, and the more manipulative energy is the lower side. And jacks are always reprimanded from this, is because the jacks is connected to the 7 is another one of the Christ consciousness card. So it carries a lot of responsibility. There's a lot of bisexuality with jacks. Being very gender neutral is very common as well. And so that creativity, that ability to manipulate is there. But when a jack carries the overall good of everyone involved in their heart when they're decision making, they can do incredible things, and they can be extremely popular. Then we shift to queens, which again, I'll mention that happens to be my birth card. The loving mother is the Queen of Hearts. The Queen of Clubs is, like the intuition. The Queen of Diamonds is the Lady of Wealth, and so on. So this queen energy is all about nurturing, all about mothering. They come with a strength and a softness, normally no matter whether they're male or female gender-wise, and they normally carry a very family type of attitude, and like I said, nurturing energy. So many Queen of Diamonds get into financial debt early in life, and then they have to adjust what they value. And most Queen of Hearts women especially are just drawn to motherhood like very, very quickly, and it's very common for Queen of Heart men to become the stay-at-home dad. So normally Queen of Hearts either put all of their energy into the family and it's a number one priority, or they put all that energy into a project or their work. But normally it's challenging for them to split both and to do both of them at a high level because they're so intent with how they're directing their energy. And I know I've experienced that at different levels of my life, being very career-driven in my early 20s, then being very family-oriented through my late 20s into my early 40s, and now coming back through another cycle of being more available to help the world after raising children in serious relationships and moving into being a little bit more traveling and available for bigger projects. And so, cycles are very important. I like to say that, time doesn't necessarily exist, but timing is very, very important. And timing is about these cycles and phases connected to the moon and the planets and rotations and things like that. I do want to mention with the queens, the low side is they can be very self-indulgent. And so I have done my best to touch on the high side and low side of each number. I apologize if I missed any of them. So with the king, this is where the high card of the deck. And so king, once again, doesn't matter the gender, but they carry a lot of strength, a lot of power. And normally all royalty, the jacks, queens, and kings come in with a certain deserving attitude. And so they can have like a chip on their shoulders. They can carry a frustration when people don't listen to them, when they're not able to direct. So I see a lot of unhappiness, especially with men that are kings that are stuck working for someone that they don't respect. And that's really hard for a king to do anything that they don't want to do, a king or a queen. A jack, see, can be playful about it many times and creative and make the best of it. A queen and a king are a whole lot more selective about what makes them happy, so to say. And they normally like really nice things and associating with people of a certain level of intelligence or wit or charm or love. But these suits can also bring in a certain amount of friction. Like when kings and queens meet, it is that kind of power struggle. And it's so funny to watch because it's so subtle and most people don't see it. But when somebody says, oh, I don't get a good vibe from them, many times it's just because of either the human design reflecting off of each other or the cards that are mixing and not resonating. And then there's other cards that pull certain pairings together. So, this helps to clear up certain things like soulmates or twin flames, and there's many different languages for that. But a lot of attraction and feeling that we have toward people is energetic, and we can actually chart this out between these two systems very clearly. Both of these systems help immaculately with relationships and helping two people understand their roles in the relationship. And we also sell relationship compatibility reports for $25. So we can give you a lot of information for a very affordable price. And so please reach out and go to vibrotune.com, vibrotune.com, and find our tab where our astrology information is and purchase a report, send us your information, and we'll get you a report. Otherwise, like I said, this is an introduction episode, and we wanted to give just some basic information where people could get started, and we'll get that picture on our Facebook post as soon as we can.
So after all that talking, I bet you wish you had your throat chakra activated.
Yes. I think today yours is a little weak. It's normally feeding me a little bit more, but I have been talking a lot earlier today. But this is another fact. What he's bringing up in the human design is I actually don't have the throat chakra activated, and he does. And I know that you people can feel the strength in his voice, and as you can tell, over time, mine gets weaker, and this is a proof of this energetic makeup. It's not seen as a weakness from a negative standpoint, just a lack of energy. But he does fill me in that area and helps to propel that.
So I did want to bring up, if you are born on December 31st, you're actually a joker.
Yes, which is all the cards, which I've only ever met one in person. And he's quite the character and looked very much like a joker, long flowing blonde hair and just a jovial face. And they literally go through being every card in the deck. So they're some of the biggest chameleons that there are, and that can be very challenging for them, or they can utilize that and really make it work for them.
So with the length and how much information we've had in this episode, we're actually going to taper this one off, and then in the next episode, we are going to discuss what is actually in a Destiny Card yearly report, what kind of information you'll get, and then talk about our personal experiences with how the cards have influenced and shown us things that themes that have gone on in our life, and how you can really utilize it to view what's upcoming, what kind of themes and energies that you're going to be going through, kind of like a weather report. And so you know where and what areas to be prepared in and what's upcoming in your life.
Yeah, and I think that's a good analogy. It's kind of like a blend of a weather report and a roadmap. And it kind of shows you the conditions that you're going to be going through, and then gives you maybe some suggestions of the direction that you may want to go in. But all of this is still, your so-called free will. It is whether you go against the current and chase what you want, or you choose to look at life in a little bit different way and truly try to be in the flow and see where that wants to influence you to go. And I know that I've certainly made my decision many, many years ago and left the ego world and all the things that I think that I wanted. And I'm so happy that I did. because I find that most people don't really have any idea where they're going, and certainly don't know how to get there. And I'm seeing that be a big part of a lack of contentment and happiness in our culture. So people are busier and working harder every day, but they're not getting any more complete. And so hopefully this is what we have to offer with some of this information, the Just Philosophy, my private sessions, and we can continue to grow together. So let's grow. Let's journey.
We appreciate your interest in self-growth, conscious communication, and continuing to ask the wise whys.
And remember, gradual changes over long periods of time equals lasting results.
The information in this podcast has been developed over 20 years by Alexander in his observation of his personal life, private practice, and professional environments. This information is meant for educational purposes only and is not suggested as a replacement for traditional therapies or medications. As a matter of fact, we suggest to not believe any of this information, nor any of the information out there in the world. Remember, knowledge plus experience equals wisdom. Seek the wise. We are looking forward to continuing to provide this information through this platform, and if you are drawn to support us, you can do so by the following. Sharing is caring. Share the podcast with like-minded individuals. Emotional responsibility and energetic wisdom can save the world. If you are drawn to support us monetarily, you can do so by visiting our Patreon page, where you can make a monthly donation in exchange for exclusive Wise perks. You can do this by visiting wise-wise.com/patron, Patreon. Next, you can head over to Alexander's website, where you can book private consultations in person, by phone, or on Skype. Find out more information on his live performances, class schedules, products, including birth chart analysis reports and music, and check out more information on his sound therapy tables. To do so, you can visit vibrotune.com, vibrotune.com. Finally, if you have been searching your entire life for consciously created apparel featuring the Wise logo apparel, Alexander themed clothing, or other alternative perspective designs, you can head over to Verities Apparel, where you can find all that and more. That is veritiesapparel.com, VERITEESAPPAREL.com. We want to thank you for being part of this journey.